The Deep Space Monitoring Station on Europa picked up the signal at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time. It started as a faint pulse, barely distinguishable from the cosmic background noise. But unlike random space static, this signal repeated with mathematical precision. Alan Weber, the night shift technician, almost missed it. He had been sipping his third cup of synthetic coffee when the pattern recognition software flagged an anomaly. At first he thought it was another glitch in the aging equipment. The Europa station was overdue for upgrades, but budget cuts had pushed renovations back another 5 years. Control. This is Europa Station. We're picking up something unusual. From Sector 47C, Alan said into his comm unit. His voice echoed in the empty monitoring room. There was a long pause before Control responded. Europa Station, please verify. Sector 47C has shown no activity since the station was established. Verified. The signal appears artificial in origin. Sending data package now. Within hours, the discovery was escalated to North American Space Command headquarters. By noon, Dr. Abigail Lawson's quiet research day was interrupted by an urgent summons to the director's office. Dr. Lawson was the leading xenolinguist in the Western Hemisphere, short with curly brown hair that she never seemed able to tame. Her unassuming appearance masked one of the sharpest minds in her field. She had spent the last 15 years developing systems to potentially decode alien communications, though many of her colleagues considered such work purely theoretical. You're saying we've received a potentially non-human signal? Abigail asked, looking at the data displayed on the wall screen in Director Wells's office. That's what we need you to determine, said Director Wells, a stern woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. The pattern is too regular to be natural, but it doesn't match any known human broadcast signature. Abigail studied the waveform. I'll need my team and full access to the quantum computing lab. You have it. National security clearance has been granted for your entire department. We need answers, Dr. Lawson. Fast ones. For the next week, Abigail and her team worked around the clock. They fed the signal through every analysis program they had developed. On the 8th day, the first breakthrough came when Dr. Keith Daniels, an astrobiologist brought in to consult, noticed something interesting about the mathematical sequence. It's prime numbers, he said, pointing to the screen. But not just any primes. These are in a specific sequence that could be used to build a two-dimensional image. Using this insight, they reconfigured their approach. Within hours, the signal began to transform into what appeared to be a visual message. As the image clarified on their screens, a collective gasp filled the room. The message contained mathematical formulas, astronomical coordinates, and what appeared to be a language unlike any human tongue. But most disturbing was a series of images that seemed to show the systematic destruction of star systems. It's a warning, Abigail whispered as the final translations came through their systems 3 days later. It's from a civilization that calls themselves the Vardari. The core of the message was clear and chilling. The Nexus Dominion expands. They consume. They assimilate. They cannot be reasoned with. Hide your existence. When Abigail presented these findings to the United Earth Council, the room fell into stunned silence. The council, made up of representatives from Earth's 12 political regions, had been convened for an emergency session. And you're certain of this translation? Asked Councillor Lee from the East Asian Coalition. As certain as we can be without direct contact with the sender, Abigail replied. The mathematical components of the message served as a Rosetta Stone. We're confident in our interpretation. So some alien civilization is warning us about another alien civilization? Asked Councillor Okafor from the African Union. And we should what? Hide under our cosmic beds? I believe we should heed the warning, Abigail said firmly. At minimum, we should not broadcast our location or capabilities until we understand more. Senator Gregory Hammond, representing North America, stood up. He was tall, with perfectly styled silver hair and the confident smile of a man used to getting his way. With all due respect to Dr. Lawson's expertise, he said, his voice smooth and commanding, this represents the most significant opportunity in human history. We now have confirmation that intelligent life exists beyond Earth. Instead of cowering in fear, we should establish contact. That's not what I'm suggesting, Abigail countered. The warning is specific about the threat posed by this nexus, Dominion. We should proceed with extreme caution. The debate raged for days. Meanwhile, Captain Eric Monroe of the USS Horizon was ordered to prepare for a reconnaissance mission toward the source of the signal. Eric was a third-generation spacer, with weather-beaten features and steady blue eyes that had seen the far reaches of the solar system. His ship, the newest in the fleet, was being outfitted with enhanced sensors and stealth capabilities. "I don't like going in blind," Eric told his first officer, Lieutenant Olivia Bennett, as they reviewed the mission parameters. "This could be first contact, or it could be flying into a trap." "The Council is still debating our official response," Olivia replied. She was younger than Eric but had earned his respect through her tactical brilliance. "But Hammond's faction is gaining support for an active approach." Eric frowned. "Politicians see opportunities. I see unknowns." As the Horizon prepared to depart, Senator Hammond was making his case before a special session of the Council. His powerful oratory skills were on full display. "Throughout human history, our greatest achievements came from facing the unknown with courage," he declared. "The Vardari may have chosen isolation, but that isn't the human way. We explore. We connect. We progress through engagement, not hiding." Dr. Lawson watched from the gallery, a sense of dread growing as Hammond swayed the Council. She had brought Dr. Keith Daniels with her, hoping his additional insights might strengthen her position. "He's not understanding the nature of the threat," Keith whispered. "I've been analyzing the astronomical data included in the message. The Vardari showed the destruction of 14 star systems, plotted over what appears to be just 2 centuries. Whatever this nexus is, it moves quickly and leaves nothing behind." But Hammond's vision proved more compelling than Abigail's caution. After a final vote, the Council authorized a response signal to be sent, containing information about Earth's location, basic human biology, cultural highlights, and technological capabilities. "This is a mistake," Abigail told Hammond after the session. "You're putting humanity at risk to advance your political career." Hammond's smile didn't reach his eyes. "When this leads to the greatest advancement in human history, I hope you'll reconsider your pessimism, Doctor." 3 days later, humanity's message was broadcast toward the stars using the powerful transmitter array on Mars. Captain Monroe's ship departed shortly after, heading toward the coordinates from which the Vardari warning had originated. As the weeks passed, Abigail continued studying the original message, searching for any additional information that might help prepare Earth, if the worst happened. Working with Keith Daniels, she discovered subtle patterns in the data that had initially been overlooked. "There's more here than just a warning," she told him one night as they worked alone in the lab. "I think the Vardari included technological information, possibly weapons or defense systems, but it's encoded differently than the main message." Keith looked troubled. "Let's hope we crack it before we need it." 6 months after Earth's broadcast, a monitoring station in the Kuiper Belt detected unusual energy readings at the edge of the solar system. Multiple objects were decelerating. From near light speed, their massive energy signatures unlike anything in human records. The technician on duty immediately sent an alert to Earth Command. By the time Captain Monroe's ship detected the approaching vessels and sent warning of their immense size and number, the first of the biomechanical ships had already altered course directly toward Earth. As screens across the planet showed the approaching fleet, Senator Hammond stared in horror at what his ambition had brought to humanity's doorstep. In her, Abigail Lawson looked at the same images and whispered. They ignored the warning. The first transmissions from the approaching ships came 3 days later. They were brief and left no room for negotiation. "We are the Nexus. You will be evaluated and processed. Resistance is inefficient." Humanity's first contact with alien life would not be a celebration of cosmic brotherhood. It would be a fight for survival. 3 years had passed since humanity first received the Vardari warning. Now, the consequences of ignoring that warning were becoming devastatingly clear. The first Nexus ships entered Earth's orbit with a display of power designed to eliminate any thought of resistance. 7 massive vessels, each nearly the size of Manhattan, positioned themselves strategically around the planet. Smaller craft swarmed like insects around the motherships. In the underground command center beneath what was once North American Space Command headquarters, Dr. Abigail Lawson watched the latest satellite feeds with a heavy heart. Another harvesting operation has begun in Eastern Europe, reported Lieutenant Olivia Bennett, now promoted to commander after the loss of her ship in the first wave of attacks. Her once pristine uniform was worn and patched, like everything else in the Resistance. How many people? Abigail asked, though she dreaded the answer. Early estimates suggest 40,000. They targeted another technology research center. Abigail closed her eyes briefly. The Nexus had a pattern. They valued technology and the minds that created it. Their harvesting operations weren't about killing humans, but rather about collecting them, particularly engineers, scientists, and innovators. No one knew exactly what happened to those taken. The Resistance had yet to rescue a single person from a Nexus vessel. Any word from Captain Monroe? Abigail asked. His last transmission came through the relay station on Titan, the USS Horizon. Is still operational but had to go dark after nearly being caught in a Nexus patrol net. The door to the command center slid open, and Dr. Keith Daniels entered. The past 3 years had aged him considerably. His once black hair was now streaked with gray and deep lines etched his face. But his eyes still held the same intellectual curiosity that had helped decode the Vardari warning years ago. I think we found something, he said without preamble. Abigail straightened. The Vardari data? Keith nodded. The encoded portions you discovered before the invasion. We finally have enough processing power to crack some of it. It references a location on Europa, near the original monitoring station. Based on the data, I believe there's a Vardari outpost there. Hope, that rarest of commodities in the post-invasion world, flickered in Abigail's chest. If we could access Vardari technology, it could change everything. Keith finished. Commander Bennett looked skeptical. Europa is in the heart of Nexus-controlled space now. They've turned Jupiter and its moons into their main base of operations in the solar system. Which is why they might not expect us to go there, came a new voice. The three turned to see a man in a dust-covered uniform enter the command center. Despite the grime of hard travel, the rank insignia of captain was still visible on his collar. Eric, Abigail exclaimed. Captain Eric Monroe offered a tired smile. The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. After quick greetings, Eric's expression turned serious. We made contact with the resistance cell on Ganymede. They've been monitoring Nexus communications. We found a weakness, a gap in their patrol patterns near Europa that occurs every 42 days due to the orbital mechanics of Jupiter's moons. The next window opens in 6 days. Commander Bennett was already at the tactical display. If we use the stealth modifications your team developed, Captain, we might be able to slip a small ship through. As they discussed the logistics of the mission, another figure entered the command center. Senator Gregory Hammond no longer carried himself with his former confidence. The man who had convinced humanity to broadcast its location to the stars now bore the weight of that decision in his stooped shoulders and haunted eyes. I heard Captain Monroe returned, he said quietly, and that you found something on Europa. The room fell silent. Despite Hammond's work with the Resistance since the invasion, many still blamed him for humanity's current predicament. Abigail was the first to speak. We believe there may be Vardari technology there. Technology that could help us fight back. Hammond nodded slowly. I want to volunteer for the mission. Eric raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, Senator, this will be a high-risk operation requiring specialized skills. I was a naval officer before I entered politics, Hammond replied. And I need to do this. I need to try to make things right. Before anyone could respond, the command center's alert system blared. A young communications officer spoke urgently into her headset before turning to the group. We've got an incoming transmission from Agent Winters. His cover in the Boston Processing Center has been compromised. Nexus forces are converging on his location, but he says he has critical information. Commander Bennett rushed to a console. Get me a secure line to his extraction team. The next 12 hours were chaos as the Resistance coordinated a dangerous rescue operation in what was once downtown Boston. By the time Agent Frank Winters was brought to the command center, he was badly injured but alive. "They're building something," he gasped as medics worked on his wounds. "Not just harvesting humans for study or resources, they're using human minds to create a new kind of neural network." Abigail leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "The Nexus is a collective consciousness spanning hundreds of species they've integrated over millennia," Frank explained through gritted teeth. "But they consider human brains uniquely valuable, more adaptable, more creative. They're using our people to evolve their own collective mind." The implications were chilling. The Nexus wasn't just an invader. It was consuming what made humanity special and incorporating it into itself. "There's more," Frank added. "I accessed their communication logs. They've sent word to their main fleet. What's here now is just the advance force. The real invasion hasn't even begun." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Later, that night, as the command center quieted for the few hours the Resistance allowed for rest, Abigail found Eric alone, studying star charts. "You're thinking about your family," she said softly. Eric didn't look up. "My brother's family was in Chicago when the third harvester landed there." Abigail placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find a way to fight back. This mission to Europa, it could be the break we need." "You really believe the Vardari left something that could help us?" "I do," she said firmly. "The warning wasn't their only message. I'm certain they left tools to fight the Nexus for any species brave enough to use them." 5 days later, a small team prepared to embark on the Europa mission. The transport vessel was little more than a retrofitted cargo ship, but it had been upgraded with experimental stealth technology based on observations of Nexus sensor capabilities. Captain Monroe would lead the mission, with Dr. Lawson, Dr. Daniels, and a small security team including Commander Bennett. Despite initial objections, Senator Hammond was included. His knowledge of Europa's monitoring station infrastructure could prove valuable. As they made final preparations, Abigail received a transmission from another Resistance cell. A civilian woman named Alice Hernandez had escaped a Nexus processing facility with help from an inside source, a being that appeared to be a Nexus entity but had somehow developed independent thoughts. "It told me the Nexus fears something about humans," Alice reported, her face gaunt on the video feed. "Something they've never encountered before. It said our minds resist the collective in ways no other species has managed." This news added urgency to the Europa mission. If humans could naturally resist Nexus integration, and if the Vardari had left behind technology that could exploit this resistance, humanity might have a fighting chance. The night before launch, Eric found Abigail in the ship's small observation deck, looking at the stars that were now fraught with danger. "Do you ever wish you hadn't been the one to decode the warning?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. Knowledge is never the enemy, even painful knowledge. It's what we do with it that matters." "Then let's do something with it," Eric said, determination hardening his voice. "Let's find what the Vardari left behind and show the Nexus that they should have heeded their own warning about humanity." As the small ship slipped away from Earth the next morning using the moon's shadow as cover, Abigail thought of all humanity had lost and what they still might save. The Nexus had made a critical error in targeting Earth. They had assumed humans would be like other species they had consumed, technically capable but ultimately submissive to superior force. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The small ship approached Europa with all systems running silent. Inside, the team held their breath as they slipped through the gap in the Nexus patrol pattern. Captain Eric Monroe guided the vessel manually, relying on instinct rather than computers that might be detected. 30 seconds until we enter Europa's shadow," Commander Olivia Bennett whispered, though there was no need for quiet in the vacuum of space. Dr. Abigail Lawson clutched the datapad containing her translations of the Vardari coordinates. After years of work, they were finally about to discover if her theory was correct. If the ancient aliens had indeed left behind technology that could help humanity fight the Nexus. The ship trembled slightly as Eric engaged the landing thrusters. They descended toward a vast plain of ice near Europa's equator, where the original monitoring station had detected the Vardari signal 3 years ago. "We're picking up unusual energy readings below the surface," Dr. Keith Daniels reported from the science station, about 300 meters down. "That matches the Vardari data," Abigail confirmed, excitement edging into her voice. Senator Gregory Hammond leaned forward. "The monitoring station had tunnels that extended deep into the ice for collecting samples. We could use those to access whatever's down there." The landing was tense but successful. They touched down 2 kilometers from the abandoned station. Using a natural ice formation for cover, the team quickly donned their environmental suits. "Remember, we have 48 hours before the patrol gap closes," Eric reminded them as they prepared to venture outside. "After that, our chances of getting off Europa undetected dropped significantly." The walk across Europa's icy surface was eerie. Jupiter loomed enormous in the black sky, its massive presence a constant reminder of how far they were from home, and how close they were to the main Nexus fleet that had made Jupiter's orbit its base of operations. They reached the monitoring station to find it partially collapsed. The Nexus had bombed it during their initial sweep of the solar system, but they hadn't bothered with a thorough destruction, apparently dismissing it as unimportant. "The main entrance is blocked," Commander Bennett observed, shining her light on the rubble. "There's an emergency access point on the south side," Hammond said. "I helped design these stations before I entered politics." They found the access hatch exactly where Hammond had indicated. Inside, the station was cold and dark, emergency lighting having failed long ago. They moved carefully through the abandoned corridors, their suit lights casting long shadows. "The sample collection tunnels should be through here," Hammond led them to a sealed door that still had backup power. Keith used a portable device to hack the old Earth security system. The door slid open with a groan of protest, revealing a vertical shaft that plunged deep into Europa's ice. "The elevator's dead," Eric noted, examining the controls. "We'll have to climb down." Using their suit's magnetic anchors, they began the long descent. 300 meters was a significant journey in the low gravity, and it took nearly an hour before they reached the bottom. "The energy signature is stronger here," Keith said, consulting his scanner. "And it's moving." "Moving?" Olivia's hand went to her weapon. "Not like something alive," Keith clarified. "More like it's pulsing, cycling through different patterns." They followed the readings through a narrow tunnel that had been drilled into the ice decades ago by the station's scientific team. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger cavern that the humans immediately recognized was not of their making. The ice walls were smooth and curved in ways that Earth drilling technology couldn't achieve. And embedded in the center of the chamber was a structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It appeared to be a perfect sphere about 5 meters in diameter, hovering slightly above the ground without any visible means of support. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, occasionally pulsing with soft blue light. "Vardari," Abigail breathed, approaching the sphere slowly. "It has to be." As she drew near, the patterns on the sphere began to shift more rapidly. A section of the surface rippled and then opened, creating a doorway. "It's responding to your presence," Keith said in amazement. Abigail hesitated at the entrance. The Vardari message said they left something for species brave enough to use it. I think we're meant to go inside." Eric moved to her side. "I'll go first." "No," she said firmly. "The patterns are similar to the language structures in the warning message. I'm the one most likely to understand what we find." After a brief argument, they agreed that Abigail would enter first, followed by Eric, while the others remained outside to maintain contact. Inside the sphere, Abigail found herself in what appeared to be a control room of sorts. There were no screens or buttons as humans would understand them, but there were areas where the flowing patterns concentrated. "It's interfacing directly with my suit," she reported to the others. "I'm getting data streams." Eric watched as Abigail's eyes widened behind her helmet visor. "What is it?" It's incredible. The Vardari weren't extinct when they sent the warning. They uploaded their consciousness into this system. This isn't just technology, it's their legacy, their minds. Outside the sphere, Keith's scanner began to beep urgently. Something's happening. The energy output is increasing exponentially. Inside, Abigail felt a strange pressure in her mind, like someone was knocking on a door asking to be let in. They want to communicate directly, she told Eric, her voice full of wonder. They're asking permission to interface with my neural implant. All Earth scientists had basic neural implants to help process data. They were simple devices compared to what the Vardari were proposing. Is that safe? Eric asked, concern evident in his voice. I don't know, Abigail admitted, but this might be our only chance to understand what they left for us. Before Eric could object further, Abigail activated her neural implant's external access protocols. Immediately, her mind was flooded with information, images, concepts, technological designs far beyond human understanding. She gasped and would have fallen if Eric hadn't caught her. It's too much, she whispered. Too fast. But even as she struggled, her mind began to adapt. The Vardari consciousness adjusted, slowing the data transfer to a pace she could handle. And then Abigail understood. She saw the true nature of the Nexus. Not just a conquering force, but a parasitic entity that spread across the galaxy, assimilating species and stripping worlds before moving on. She saw how the Vardari had developed a weapon that could disrupt the Nexus hive mind, potentially freeing the assimilated species. But the Vardari, with their deep commitment to pacifism, had chosen not to use it. They couldn't bring themselves to deploy a weapon, even against an enemy as terrible as the Nexus. Instead, they had hidden themselves away, leaving their technology for other species who might make a different choice. They're giving us the weapon, Abigail said. Her voice changed somehow, deeper with new knowledge. And more, they're giving us their understanding of Nexus technology. Outside, Commander Bennett's communication device buzzed with an incoming transmission. Captain, we have a problem. Nexus patrol ships are changing course. They're heading this way. Someone must have detected our energy signature. Inside the sphere, Eric grabbed Abigail's arm. We need to go, now. Abigail seemed in a trance, her mind still connected to the Vardari consciousness. I need more time. The transfer isn't complete. We don't have more time, Eric insisted, trying to pull her toward the exit. The sphere's pattern suddenly flashed bright red. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere spoke in perfect English. Nexus presence detected, stealth protocols engaging. The entire chamber shuddered, and the patterns on the sphere's surface froze. What's happening? Eric demanded. Abigail's eyes refocused as she partially disconnected from the interface. The Vardari system is hiding itself, and us. It's generating a field that should mask our presence from the Nexus. Outside, Keith confirmed this. The energy signature just vanished. It's like the sphere doesn't exist anymore. They waited in tense silence as the Nexus patrol ships passed overhead. Finally, Commander Bennett reported that the immediate danger had passed. But our window for departure is closing, she warned. We need to start back soon if we're going to make it home. Inside the sphere, Abigail made a decision. I need to complete the transfer. The Vardari are offering their knowledge, everything they learned about the Nexus, everything they developed, to fight them. This is what we came for. Eric looked torn. How long? I don't know, but this is our one chance. After a moment of consideration, Eric nodded. Do it. We'll find another way home if we have to. Abigail reconnected with the Vardari interface. This time, instead of fighting the flood of information, she embraced it. The Vardari consciousness merged with her own, not overriding but enhancing, sharing millennia of knowledge and understanding. When she finally disconnected and the sphere's doorway reopened, Abigail Lawson was forever changed. She carried within her mind the legacy of an ancient species and the key to humanity's survival. Did you get what we need? Hammond asked as she emerged. Abigail's eyes held a new depth as she nodded. I have the weapon, and I know how to use it. As they began their journey back to the surface, they were unaware that their mission had triggered something else. A signal sent from the Vardari sphere, broadcasting to every corner of the solar system on frequencies the Nexus couldn't detect, but human resistance systems could. The message was simple. Humanity has claimed the legacy. The Endgame begins. 6 months after the Europa mission, Earth looked different. Not physically. The Nexus harvesters still towered over major cities, and their ships still darkened the skies. But something had changed in the eyes of the remaining humans. There was a spark that hadn't been there before. Hope. In the main resistance base beneath the ruins of Denver, Dr. Abigail Lawson stood before a gathered crowd of military leaders and scientists. Her appearance had subtly changed since merging with the Vardari consciousness. Her eyes now held a depth that made some people uncomfortable, and faint blue lines occasionally shimmered beneath her skin when she accessed the alien knowledge. The Nexus main fleet will arrive in 2 weeks, she said, her voice calm despite the dire news. Our intelligence confirms over 300 ships, far larger than what we've seen so far. Captain Eric Monroe, recently promoted to admiral after successfully leading several guerrilla strikes against Nexus supply lines, stepped forward. If the advance force nearly broke us, how can we possibly stand against their main fleet? Abigail smiled, and it transformed her serious face. Because now we have this. She gestured to Dr. Samantha Cole, who unveiled a device in the center of the room. It was smaller than most people expected, a sphere about the size of a basketball, with flowing patterns similar to the Vardari artifact they had found on Europa. This is the modified version of the Vardari weapon, Abigail explained. We call it the Nexus Disruptor. The original was designed to temporarily break the connection between Nexus components, but we've enhanced it. Dr. Cole, an engineer who had been working closely with Abigail since their return, continued the explanation. Instead of just disrupting the Nexus hive mind, this will rewrite their collective consciousness. It will free the assimilated species while maintaining their technological advancement. Commander Olivia Bennett looked skeptical. How does something this small affect an enemy that spans hundreds of star systems?